you?
Yeah, well, I started working in animation out of a sincere love for classic Disney movies. Not just the way I draw, but the kind of stories I like to tell come very much from how obsessed I was with those as a child. However, I loved all cartoons. I'd have to admit that, Warner Brothers, classic Warner Brothers animation is a huge influence. My very first animation job on a movie called Cats Don't Dance had wonderful, appealing character designs, and I was only 21 when I got that job. I did a lot of learning, and I think a lot of the design elements that I do in my current artwork carry over from how much I learned on that film. And then, of course, meeting my husband and getting to work on Powerpuff Girls, there's no way that wouldn't leak its way into my design style as well.
Well, and it certainly is a very distinctive style, both Powerpuff Girls and, My Little Pony. And I think that all the artists that are here that have, tried to capture a little essence of that style really can credit it to what you've done to, create that new type of style, because it is a new type of style.
Yeah.
And it seems that it has almost some even anime elements to it, too.
Yeah.
Are there any anime fans in the audience here? Okay, so just one or two. Are there any specific, and this is something that I think is kind of interesting about the show, and I've heard a lot of people say this, is that you managed to make, in a lot of senses, a westernized, it's not an anime per se, but a anime-inspired western show. And I wanted to know if there was a specific type of anime or film that you have seen that may have been that influence.
I can't say so, except for, the obvious influence of, the transformation sequence kind of stuff that happened in the pilot. The world is getting smaller, and everything you see influences you. I think, if you look into the history of Japanese animation, so much of the style that we all associate with Japan comes from Tezuka. And when you do a little research into the history of Tezuka, you find out he was trying to draw like Walt Disney. And so West influenced East, and East influenced West again. I can't say I looked at anime and said, I'm going to do that. And, when my husband Craig talks about the Powerpuff Girls, he'll say the same thing. He was everyone thinks the Powerpuff Girls look like, chibi, super deformed anime characters. He was influenced by Keen paintings from the 60s, which was from, North America. So I think those kind of influences just sneak into our brain, and this was also a collaborative effort, and the animators watch what they watch, the directors watch what they watch, and it's a collective artistic community, and we all influence each other.
Well, the next question then is kind of an interesting one, and I think it's something that people occasionally hear about but don't really know too much about, which is that your original vision for the show, the artistic style was carried through, but there were specific little details that were changed.
Yeah.
Maybe you could share a couple of those details that didn't follow through to the final version. I mean, obviously the current version is amazing and we all love it, but there were, say, names that were different, or, species that were different.
Yeah.
Can you give a few little nuggets out there for the audience?
Yeah. Well, making a television show is an organic process, and you might sit down with a specific plan of a path you want to follow, but once you get on that path and you start working with other people, you deviate and you take things in other directions. And then you also run into things like standards and practices and legal and all that sort of stuff. But we had a lot of characters that had their names changed. Apple Bloom was originally Appleseed, and she was originally the only Crusader. In fact, there were no Crusaders originally. I was asked to include Sweetie Belle and Scootaloo, and I had to create the Cutie Mark Crusaders after the fact. Big Macintosh was originally Big Apple. And he ran Big Apple Acres, or Big Apple Orchard, actually.
Did he have a New York accent?
He did not. The yup and nope thing, that was always there.
I think Peter Nooch proved today that he could have.
Yes, I'm sure he could have. Zecora was originally named Shaman. That didn't go through legal. And she was originally supposed to play a little bit of a larger role in the series. She was supposed to be kind of a mentor character to Twilight. And it wasn't that we said, no, forget it, and threw the idea out. It's just the stories we were exploring, it just kind of didn't come up. And we did Bridal Gossip to introduce her with the intention of making her this mentor sort of character, specifically when the characters went off on adventures and they needed a character who could give them information about a new monster or a new place that they were going, that she'd be this great device to get that exposition out as quickly as possible. And it just, that role just didn't seem to hash out for her. Ponyville was originally called Philadelphia. That's where I was glad that we could come back around and use that again, but that was Ponyville's original name. I'm trying to think of what else. Rarity, originally I wanted her to have a British accent. But it was fake. It was always fake. She was faking that to try to look more sophisticated. That's all that comes to mind right now.
Well, and of course, as a brony out there, I know that a lot of people who are hearing this now are then going to go back and try and portray Rarity that way. And one thing I thought that you mentioned earlier before the panel to me that I think is kind of important for people to understand is that although you had the creative vision for the show, there were the differences when it came out, and also that, you know, not everything, not every little detail was planned in advance.
Yeah.
That, you know,
oh, definitely not.
Would you say then that as the episodes came out, you know, how much of that was, obviously in terms of writing it was pre-planned and animating, but in terms of, you started out with what a lot of people refer to as the Bible of
yes.
the show. How in-depth was that Bible and how adaptable was it after you came out with it?
Well, an animation Bible is a actual tool that that's an industry term, Bible, and it is a tool that we all begin with when we start new shows. It's reference for everybody who's working on the show, and they are all by nature flexible. This is our starting point. Again, you know, it's an organic process, and you learn things as you go. You change your mind as you go. New people bring new things to the table, so it's always flexible. But I wanted to, you know, I wrote an unusually large Bible. It was 40 pages, writing and illustration. But that was mostly just because I just wanted to sell it so bad. I just didn't want to leave anything up to the imagination. Because, you know, I have this term that, like, you know, sometimes you'll get things rejected because somebody imagined it poorly. You know, I call it taking it to Stupidville. And you pitch something, and then they go, why would you want to do that? That's stupid. And you're like, you're imagining it's stupid. I'm not going to do it stupid. So I go overboard and I fill in lots of information. It was pretty in depth, and there's you know, if I look back at it, I can only say maybe only 15-20% of it maybe might be altered from the original Bible.
Well, so then, with that in mind, because I think a lot of people out there who, you know, have questions about, say, specific episodes, specific concepts. You know, I heard that on another panel you were asked about, you know, the origins of Discord or the origins of Celestia and Luna, and I was wondering if you could kind of talk about how you approach that kind of a question. You know, how do you, what's your answer to that sort of specific, you know, concept?
Well, you know, again, because it's an organic process, you know, I think a lot of creators sit down and they plan out their world and they plan out the arc of what they want to do and where they want to go. But in order to honor that organic process, I don't like to tie anything down unless it's in an episode. So like questions like, you know, who are Celestia's and Luna's parents? I don't know. It didn't come up. If it did come up, we would figure it out then. And there's a few things here and there that, you know, I might have started with an idea, like, you know, certain characters had things that they wanted and fates that were supposed to come to pass. and I wanted to work my way there. So like, while we were writing the show, I would plant little seeds of like, oh, maybe later if we want to do an episode where, you know, Twilight and Trixie battle it out again, I want to make sure to leave that door open. I don't know if that's going to happen. So I would always look to make sure that doors like that were open and that we weren't defining things that we didn't want to ruin later. Like I remember once in the very early episode, a storyboard artist wanted to show Rainbow Dash flying with a rainbow streak behind her, and I was like, no, take that out, because I want to do that later. But really, there's not a lot, because I want to make sure to tie it down when we get the opportunity. So if it's not in the show, I don't really have an answer of what happened before or what's going to happen later. It's defined in the writer room at the time, and it isn't canon until it's on the screen.
So would you say then that My Little Pony: Friendship and Magic is not predestined? That maybe there's still story yet to tell?
Oh, definitely. And I wanted it to be that way.
Well, I think obviously, you know, the vision that you've had for it has really carried over very well. But you also have vision for a few other new shows that are going to be coming out and a couple projects you've been working on. One of those is Galaxy Girls. Can you give us... Can you give us a little bit of maybe background on, you know, the Galaxy Girls idea and where it's at right now?
Sure. Well, Galaxy Girls is a line of dolls I created several years ago. It was intended to be a toy line. I never really thought it would make a really great television show, but like every time I pitched it around, everybody wanted it to be a television show. It is, up until My Little Pony, it was like the bane of my existence that it was really hard to pitch shows for girls, especially if all the characters were girls. That was one of the reasons I wanted it to just be toys. Galaxy Girls is, I like to say they're in stasis right now. I don't want to do it until I can do it right. So we're looking for the right partner, someone who has the right kind of funding and is going to share my vision. I would rather wait until I can make it as good as possible than get it out there really fast and have it not live up to its potential. So we're looking for partners. We've actually talked to someone recently that has potential, but if anything comes of it, especially in terms of media, it might be a little while yet, but I don't want to ruin it, so I'm waiting until I can do it right.
And it really seems like that was kind of the approach you took with My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic as well. It seems like your goal is to create a setup where it has the really the resources and the openness for that creativity to develop organically.
Oh, definitely. Like when I was doing every step that I took before it got, before I signed my contract, I just kept going. At any point now, this is going to go sour. I better enjoy it while it lasts. And I remember, like, every step that I turned something in or did a pitch, I was like, this is the last time. It's going to turn stupid after this. It's going to get stupid after this one. And it never did.
Well, you also have another show that you're working on the DC network, Super